when I was a kid, maybe 10 years old, living up in Washington State, it was my job to take the trash out to the burn barrel and burn it. But one day, it came time for me to do my chore, and my mother said, hey, you need to go burn the trash. So I went and I grabbed the burnable trash, the paper trash. I looked down in the bucket, and we had a bunch of printer paper strips. Now, those of you that come from the olden days, like I do, will remember that printers used to be like dot matrix printers. And your printer paper wouldn't be separate sheets of paper. It would be one long connected ream of paper, and along the sides there were those little strips with holes in them, right? And you would tear those off afterwards, and you would separate the paper after you had printed it out. But it would feed through the printer as one long big strip. Well, we had somehow, I guess we'd been printing stuff on the, and I'm talking old dot matrix printers, right? Like the, we had accumulated somehow a bunch of these strips had all been torn off and then stuffed into the burnable trash. And I remember looking down in that bucket, like my little 10-year-old self, looking down in there and seeing all those strips. And I had this burst of inspiration, maybe inspiration is the wrong word, but I had this burst of foresight. And I thought, these little strips are gonna catch on fire and they're gonna float. They're gonna float out of the burn barrel, so they're maybe gonna cause a fire. So I went and tried to tell my mom. I think she was in the bathroom at the moment. So I'm like trying to talk through the door, and I'm sure every parent in the world can identify with this. You're in the bathroom and the kid's trying to tell you something. And she was like, what? And I'm like, there's all these little strips and they're maybe gonna burn and float away and cause a problem. And she was having trouble hearing what I was saying in the moment. And she was like, go do your chore. Just go do your chore. So I was like, okay. And I took the trash out, I put it in the burn barrel, I started it on fire. We had a little grate that would go over the burn barrel. I put the grate there and went back inside. I remember later, I don't know how much later it was, 20 minutes, half an hour, but I opened the back door to look at the burn barrel. I guess to see if my vision had come true. And the hill, the burn barrel was on a little hill behind our house, and that little ridge was just all in flames. Just little 10-year-old me, jaw dropped open, and I ran in the house. There's a fire, there's a fire. Mom comes out and looks, and she's like, oh my goodness. She's like, run to the neighbors, tell them to call the fire department. And she goes out there with a hose, a little tiny hose, trying to put out this very, growing blaze. And we lived out, it wasn't anywhere around where I am now. We didn't live in Wyoming, but we lived out in the rural area. So there were apple orchards nearby. There was lots of brush and weeds and stuff that was ready to catch fire. So this could turn into a big thing. She ran out there with the water hose, and she's trying to put out the fire, and I ran to the neighbors, little 10-year-old me, completely traumatized by what was going on. And I remember knocking on the door of the neighbor's house, and their door was open. Their screen door was closed, but their door was open, and I could hear the neighbors inside. They were older. They had seen the flames already. They had seen the blaze, and I could hear them talking to the grandbaby. The grandbaby was saying something about the fire, and they were like, yeah, and I'm trying to knock on the door, and nobody can hear me. And finally they come to the door, and I'm like, there's a fire, can you call? And they were like, oh, sweetie, we called the fire department, okay? And I was like, oh, okay, and then I ran off. And the fire department came, and they put out the fire, and we got fined. I think my parents got fined. I remember the fireman asking which parent told me to do my chore, because that was the one that had to get the ticket for for almost burning down the orchard. It was a little bit of a traumatic experience. But I haven't had that many moments like that in life where I had the foresight, this could go terribly wrong, and then it did exactly what happened. And I think in life, you're gonna find yourself with these scenarios where you think, this could go terribly wrong. And when you have that little voice, you need to ask yourself, what happens if it does? What are the consequences? If the consequences is you lose 2 weeks of work or a month of work, or it sets you back 3 months, but you're willing to do that because you believe that the payoff might be really good and you feel like you're making an educated decision, fine. If the consequences are we lose everything, the bank repossesses it all, we don't have a reason that this is an educated decision, I'm just really hoping it turns out well, then listen to that little voice. If this could go terribly wrong means you lose the game you were playing with your friends, your team is mad at you, fine, no big deal. If this could go terribly wrong means someone could die, you're out with dirt bikes wondering if you can jump the ravine or whatever, think about the consequences and trust that negative gut. I'm not saying always listen or abide by what your negative gut is saying, but I am saying that warning should pull you up short and make you think about it. Now, in my case, I did what I was supposed to do, but I've always kind of marveled at that bolt of clear lucidity, looking down at those papers and thinking this could happen, and then it happening. I don't know what I could have done differently in that situation to keep that from happening. It's not like I knew. I didn't know, like, oh, this is going to happen and the hill's going to catch on fire. I didn't know that. But I do remember that moment thinking this could be bad. And it was bad. So when you find yourself in life thinking this could be really bad, stop and think what the consequences are. Stop and think, are you making an educated decision? What's on the line? Are you willing to risk it? And what are maybe some less risky choices, perchance? Perchance is a word I don't think I've said in 3 years. That's my thought for today. Do with it what you will.